The letter arrived on a Thursday afternoon, tucked into their mailbox between a grocery store flyer and the electric bill. Tom almost missed it. The envelope was plain white with the Pinewood Gardens HOA logo printed in the corner, and something about it made his stomach drop even before he opened it. Inside was a single page, typed in formal language that somehow managed to sound both bureaucratic and threatening at the same time. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Chen," it began. "It has come to the attention of the Pinewood Gardens Homeowners Association Board that there may be violations of community standards occurring at your residence. Specifically, concerns have been raised regarding suspicious activity and possible impersonation of law enforcement personnel." Tom read the sentence 3 times, certain he must be misunderstanding something. Impersonation of law enforcement? They were accusing Rachel of pretending to be a cop? The letter continued. "Evidence has been collected and presented to the board showing irregular activity patterns, use of clothing and equipment associated with law enforcement or security services, and behavior consistent with either unauthorized home-based security business operations or impersonation of official personnel. Both scenarios represent serious violations of our community guidelines." There was more, much more. The letter cited specific sections of the HOA bylaws. It referenced photographic documentation and detailed observation logs. It demanded a written explanation within 48 hours and warned that failure to respond could result in fines starting at $500, escalating to legal action, and potentially leading to a forced sale of the property. Tom's hands were shaking by the time he finished reading. He pulled out his phone and called Rachel, but it went straight to voicemail. That wasn't unusual. When she was working, she often couldn't answer. But right now he really needed to talk to her. He tried texting instead. "Got a letter from the HOA, it's bad. Call me when you can." Then he did what any rational person would do when faced with an incomprehensible accusation. He read the letter again, hoping it would make more sense the second time. It didn't. Patricia had really done it. She'd convinced the HOA board that Rachel was either running some kind of illegal security business out of their home or literally pretending to be a cop. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so serious. This wasn't just nosy neighbor gossip anymore. This was official board action with legal implications. Tom spent the next hour pacing the living room, the letter clutched in his hand. He thought about going to Patricia's house to confront her directly, but that would probably make things worse. He considered calling a lawyer, but what would he even say?
"My wife's HOA thinks she's a fake cop?"
That sounded insane. Rachel finally called back around 7 p.m. Tom could hear background noise on her end, voices and movement, like she was somewhere busy. "Got your text," she said. "What's going on?" Tom read her the letter word for word. There was silence on the other end for a long moment. "Are you serious?" Rachel finally said. Her voice had that particular edge it got when she was angry, but keeping it tightly controlled. "Completely serious. It's right here in my hand. Official HOA letterhead and everything." More silence. "Then I'll be home in a couple hours. Don't respond to them yet. Rachel, they want an answer in 48 hours or they're going to start fining us. $500 to start. I said I'll handle it. Trust me on this." She hung up before Tom could ask what handling it meant. Rachel got home around 9:30 that night, looking tired and irritated. She changed out of her work clothes and into jeans and a sweatshirt, but Tom could tell from her expression that she'd had a rough day even before learning about the HOA situation. She read the letter while standing in the kitchen, her face unreadable. Then she set it down on the counter and pulled out her phone. "What are you doing?" Tom asked, looking up the HOA board meeting schedule. She scrolled through the Pinewood Gardens website. "Next meeting is Monday night. I'm going to attend." "Rachel, maybe we should just write them a letter explaining that you're actually in law enforcement. Clear this up without making it a big thing." She looked up at him, and there was something in her expression that made Tom take a step back. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder and more controlled. "No," she said quietly. "Patricia Henley has been harassing us for weeks, taking photos of me without permission, documenting my schedule like I'm some kind of criminal. And now she's convinced the board to threaten us with fines and legal action because she doesn't understand what she's looking at." "I know, but this doesn't get fixed with a polite letter. Tom, She's escalated this to an official board matter with documentation and accusations, so I'm going to respond officially. There was something in the way she said it that made Tom nervous. He'd seen Rachel in work mode before, usually just glimpses when she thought he wasn't paying attention. The way she could shift from his relaxed, easygoing wife into someone harder and more intimidating. It was like watching someone flip a switch. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to attend their meeting and address their concerns." She picked up the letter again. "They want evidence that I'm not impersonating law enforcement? Fine, I'll provide evidence." The weekend passed slowly. Tom kept expecting Rachel to change her mind, to decide that a simple explanatory letter would be enough. But by Sunday evening, she was preparing for the meeting with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd made up her mind. Monday morning, Patricia drove past their house 3 times. Tom watched from the window, wondering if she knew what was coming. Probably not. Patricia struck him as the type who was so confident in her own righteousness that she never considered she might be wrong. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood park. Tom had never attended one before, but according to the website, they were open to all residents. Rachel planned to get there early. At 6:30, she was getting ready. She dressed in business casual clothes, nice pants, a simple blouse, a blazer. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed law enforcement. She looked like she could be heading to any professional office job. "You look nervous," she said to Tom as they headed to the car. "I am nervous. This feels like we're going to war with the HOA. We're not going to war. We're going to resolve a misunderstanding." But there was a slight smile on her face that suggested she was looking forward to this more than she probably should be. The community center was already half full when they arrived. Tom recognized some of the faces from around the neighborhood. There was the retired couple from 2 streets over. The woman with the 3 kids who was always walking them to school. A few people he'd seen but never spoken to. And sitting in the front row looking like a general surveying her troops was Patricia Henley. Patricia noticed them immediately. Tom watched her eyes narrow, watched her lean over to whisper something to the man sitting next to her. The man glanced back at them, then quickly looked away. The board sat at a table at the front of the room. 5 people total, all looking uncomfortable except for Patricia, who looked triumphant. There was a printed agenda on each seat. Tom picked one up and scanned it. Most of it was boring HOA business. Proposed changes to landscaping requirements, discussion of pool maintenance schedules, and then, second to last on the list, discussion of potential violations at 847 Maple Drive. That was their address. At exactly 7 p.m., the board president called the meeting to order. His name was Richard something. Tom had forgotten his last name. He was a balding man in his 60s who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They worked through the agenda items slowly. So slowly, Tom found himself getting more anxious with each passing minute. Rachel, sitting next to him, looked perfectly calm. She'd taken out her phone and was checking her email like this was any other boring meeting. Finally, 45 minutes in, Richard cleared his throat and looked down at his agenda. "Next item. Patricia, you brought concerns about the property at 847 Maple Drive." Patricia stood up like she'd been waiting for this moment all evening, which Tom realized she probably had been. "Yes, thank you, Richard." She pulled out a folder and Tom's heart sank when he saw how thick it was. "Over the past 3 weeks, I've documented serious concerns about activities at this property." She started laying out photos on the table where the board could see them. Tom craned his neck and felt his stomach twist. They were pictures of Rachel, leaving the house, getting into her car, walking to the mailbox. Some were taken from close up, others from across the street. All of them had timestamps in the corner. "As you can see," Patricia continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone, "the resident at this address leaves at irregular hours wearing what appears to be tactical or security gear. Sometimes as early as 4 a.m., sometimes late at night. The clothing includes tactical pants, boots, vests with multiple pockets, and what appears to be equipment pouches." She pulled out more photos, close-ups that must have been zoomed in from the originals. Tom could see Rachel's jacket, her belt, her boots. "I have reason to believe this resident is either operating an unauthorized home business providing security services, or, and I know this sounds extreme, but the evidence supports it, impersonating law enforcement personnel." Amur. Rachel's hand moved slowly and deliberately as she reached into her jacket. Tom could see Patricia tense up, could see several people in the audience lean forward in their seats. For a brief, absurd moment, he wondered if people thought she was reaching for a weapon, but what she pulled out was something far more powerful than that. She placed a leather credential case on the table in front of the HOA board members. Then she flipped it open. The silence in the room was absolute. Richard leaned forward, squinting at the case. Then his eyes went wide. The woman next to him actually gasped. One by one, the board members looked at what Rachel had laid in front of them. And one by one, their expressions changed from curiosity to shock to something that looked a lot like panic. "My name is Rachel Chen," she said, her voice steady and professional. "I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've been with the Bureau for 9 years. Currently, I work in counterterrorism." Patricia had gone very, very pale. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Richard picked up the credential case with shaking hands, examining it closely. The badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Next to it was an identification card with Rachel's photo, her name, and the FBI seal. It looked official because it was official. Is this real?" Richard asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes. If you need verification, there's a number on the back of my ID card that will connect you directly to the FBI field office. They can confirm my employment and credentials. Though I'd prefer if we kept this as quiet as possible, for reasons that should be obvious." She let that sink in for a moment. Tom watched the board members exchange glances. He could practically see them running through everything Patricia had said, everything she'd documented, and realizing exactly how badly this had gone wrong. "The clothing Mrs. Henley has been documenting," Rachel continued, "is my work attire. Federal agents in certain divisions wear what civilians might think of as tactical gear. We wear it because we need to. Our jobs require us to be prepared for situations that most people, thankfully, never have to think about." She turned to face Patricia directly. The older woman had sunk back into her chair, her folder of photos clutched in her hands. "Mrs. Henley, you've spent 3 weeks surveilling a federal agent. You've photographed me during official business. You've documented my movements, my schedule, and my appearance while I was conducting federal law enforcement duties. Do you understand how serious that is?" Patricia's voice came out as a croak. "I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? You never said anything." "I don't broadcast my occupation," Rachel said. Her voice was sharp now, the professionalism giving way to barely controlled anger. "Most federal agents don't. We don't tell random strangers what we do because our safety and the safety of our families depends on a certain level of discretion." She gestured to the photos spread across the table. "These pictures? They show me leaving for work. They show my vehicle. They show what I wear on the job. You've now created a detailed record of a federal agent's daily patterns. You've made that information available to the HOA board, and judging by the gossip I've heard around the neighborhood, you've shared your suspicions with multiple neighbors." Tom could see people in the audience shifting uncomfortably. A few were staring at Patricia with expressions that ranged from shock to outright anger. The woman with 3 kids got up and quietly left the room. "In my line of work," Rachel went on, "operational security isn't paranoia. It's survival. There are people who would love to know where federal agents live. There are people who would love to know our schedules, what vehicles we drive, what our patterns are. Not because they're curious, because they want to hurt us." Richard had set down Rachel's credentials and was gripping the edge of the table like he needed something to hold on to. "Agent Chen, we had no idea. Patricia brought concerns to the board and we should have done more research before sending that letter." "You should have," Rachel agreed. "Instead, you sent me an official letter accusing me of impersonating a federal officer. Do you know what impersonating a federal officer is? It's a felony. You've essentially accused me of committing a serious federal crime." Another board member, a man in his 50s with glasses, spoke up nervously. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. We'll withdraw the violation notice immediately. Consider it voided. We sincerely apologize." "A misunderstanding," Rachel repeated. She didn't raise her voice, but somehow the words carried weight. "I moved to this neighborhood because I thought my family would be safe here. I thought I could have a normal home life separate from my work. Instead, I've been harassed and surveilled by someone who decided I was suspicious without bothering to verify a single fact." She picked up her credentials and put them back in her jacket. "I need to make something very clear. The work I do is classified. The cases I work on are sensitive. Some of them involve dangerous people. By creating this documentation and spreading suspicions about me around the neighborhood, Mrs. Henley has potentially put not just me at risk, but everyone in this community. Patricia finally found her voice. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. I thought you might be doing something illegal. You thought wrong. Rachel's voice was cold now. And instead of using common sense, instead of simply knocking on my door and asking me directly, you chose to play detective. You chose to stalk me, photograph me, and compile evidence like you were building a case. All based on what? The fact that I leave for work at irregular hours? The fact that I dress professionally for a job you didn't understand? The room was so quiet, Tom could hear the air conditioning humming. Patricia looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Her folder of photos, which had seemed so damning when she'd laid them out, now looked like what they were, the obsessive documentation of a busybody who'd let her imagination run wild. Richard cleared his throat.
Agent Chen, please accept our deepest apologies.
This should never have happened. We'll be reviewing our processes to make sure nothing like this occurs again. I appreciate that, Rachel said. But it's not just about the violation notice. Mrs. Henley has spent 3 weeks violating my privacy. She's created a security risk for my family. That's not something that gets fixed with an apology. Patricia's hands were shaking now. What are you going to do? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Tom could see her weighing her options, considering how far to push this. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. What I should do is file a complaint. Surveilling a federal agent, even unknowingly, is something the Bureau takes seriously. What I should do is make sure everyone understands the severity of what you've done. Patricia made a small sound, almost like a whimper, but Rachel continued, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume that you genuinely thought you were protecting the neighborhood, however misguided that was. So here's what's going to happen instead. She turned back to the board. First, all of this documentation gets destroyed. Every photo, every note, every piece of paper related to this investigation into my activities. I want it gone. Richard nodded immediately. Absolutely. We'll make sure of it. Second, I want it clearly stated in the board minutes that this was a misunderstanding, that I am a federal law enforcement officer, and that no violations occurred. I don't want this hanging over us as unresolved business. Of course, the woman on the board said. We'll draft that tonight. Rachel's gaze moved to Patricia. Third, Mrs. Henley stops watching me, stops documenting me, stops discussing me with the neighbors. If I find out you've continued this behavior in any way, I won't be so understanding next time. Patricia nodded frantically. Yes, of course. I'm so sorry. I don't care what you meant. Rachel cut her off. I care about what you did. You made assumptions based on nothing but your own suspicions and biases. You let those assumptions drive you to harass someone you didn't know anything about. That's not protecting the neighborhood. That's just being nosy and vindictive. Tom felt a surge of pride watching his wife stand there, calm and composed, while the woman who'd been making their life miserable for weeks fell apart. This was a side of Rachel he rarely saw, the agent, not the wife. The person who walked into dangerous situations and commanded respect through pure force of personality. One of the board members, the man with glasses, raised his hand tentatively. Agent Chen, I have to ask, is there anything we should be concerned about? I mean, in terms of the neighborhood's safety? Rachel's expression softened slightly. No, my work doesn't come home with me. I chose this neighborhood specifically because it's safe and quiet, because it's the kind of place where my husband and I can have a normal life when I'm not at the office, or at least it was supposed to be. She let that observation hang in the air for a moment, then she addressed the room at large. I understand that some of you might be uncomfortable knowing there's a federal agent living in the neighborhood. If that's the case, I'm sorry, but I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. I'm going to protect it the same way I protect everyone else. A man Tom didn't recognize spoke up from the back. I don't think anyone has a problem with you being here, Agent Chen. Honestly, it's kind of reassuring. The problem is with... He trailed off, but everyone nanning. The first thing Tom noticed the next morning was the silence. Not just the regular quiet of a Tuesday morning in a suburban neighborhood, but something deeper, an absence. He stood at the window with his coffee, looking out at the street, and realized what was missing. Patricia's silver sedan hadn't made its usual patrol past their house. Rachel was already up and getting ready for work, moving through her morning routine with the efficiency of long practice. She seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Tom supposed it had been. 3 weeks of being watched and documented would make anyone tense. "You think she's avoiding us?" Tom asked as Rachel came into the kitchen. "Definitely." Rachel poured herself coffee. "She's probably mortified. Imagine spending weeks building a case against your neighbor, presenting it to the HOA board with all that confidence, only to discover you've been stalking a federal agent. That's not something you come back from easily. Do you actually feel bad for her?" Rachel considered the question. "A little. She's clearly someone who needs to feel useful, needed. Being on the HOA board gives her that. She probably thought she was doing the right thing, protecting people. She just went about it in the worst possible way." Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and saw a message from Richard, the HOA board president. "The board wants to meet with us. Just you and me privately. Says they want to apologize properly and discuss next steps. Tell them that's not necessary." "Rachel, I think they're genuinely worried about legal issues. That letter they sent you accused you of a federal crime." She sighed. "Fine, but make it clear we're not looking for anything from them. No lawsuit, no complaints, nothing. I just want to live here in peace." The meeting was scheduled for that evening at Richard's house. Tom had never been there before. It was a large brick colonial at the end of the main street, with the kind of perfectly maintained yard that suggested either a lot of free time or a very good landscaping service. Richard answered the door, looking like he hadn't slept. There were dark circles under his eyes and his handshake was nervous and clammy. "Thank you for coming," he said, ushering them into a formal living room where the rest of the board was already waiting. Everyone except Patricia. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Coffee, water?" "We're fine," Rachel said, taking a seat on the couch. Tom sat next to her, trying to read the room. The board members all looked uncomfortable, guilty like students called to the principal's office. Richard sat down heavily in an armchair. "Agent Chen, Mr. Chen, I want to start by apologizing again for what happened. The board met last night after you left and we all agreed that we handled this situation terribly. We should have verified Patricia's claims before sending that letter," the woman from the board added. Her name was Janet, Tom remembered. "We trusted her research without doing our own due diligence. That was irresponsible." Rachel nodded but didn't say anything, letting them continue. The man with glasses, Andrew, leaned forward. "We've already destroyed all the documentation Patricia compiled. Photos, notes, everything. And we're going to amend the board procedures to require verification before any violation notices are sent out for behavioral concerns." "That's good," Tom said. "But what about Patricia? Is she still on the board?" The board members exchanged glances. Richard cleared his throat. "We've asked her to step down. She submitted her resignation this morning." Tom blinked. "She resigned?" She felt it was the best course of action, given the circumstances. And honestly, several of us felt it was necessary. Her behavior crossed serious lines. What she did to you wasn't just a mistake. It was harassment. Rachel shifted slightly in her seat. "I appreciate the board taking this seriously. But I want to be clear, I didn't ask for her to resign. I just wanted her to stop watching me." "We know," Janet said, "but this isn't just about you. Once word got around the neighborhood about what happened, we started getting complaints. Turns out Patricia has been doing similar things to other residents, not to the same extent, but watching people, documenting things, reporting minor violations that most of us would overlook. She's made a lot of people uncomfortable over the years." This was news to Tom. "Why didn't anyone say anything before?" Richard shrugged. "Because she was on the board. Because she seemed so certain about everything. Because it was easier to just comply with whatever she wanted than to fight it. But you fought back, Agent Chen, and I think that gave other people courage to speak up." Rachel looked troubled. "I didn't intend to start a revolution against your HOA board." "You didn't," Andrew assured her. "You just exposed a problem that's been festering for years. Patricia meant well, but she'd become too focused on rules and control. She forgot that we're supposed to be neighbors first, not enforcement officers." There was a pause. Then Janet spoke up hesitantly. "Some residents have expressed concern about having an FBI agent in the neighborhood. Not because they're worried about you specifically, but because they're wondering if your work might bring danger here." Rachel had clearly been expecting this question. I understand that concern. Let me address it directly. My work is compartmentalized. The people I investigate don't know where I live. I don't work cases out of my home. I don't bring files or evidence here. When I'm home, I'm just a regular resident who happens to have an unusual job. What about protection? Richard asked. Should we be concerned about anything? No more than you should be concerned about any other potential threat. Crime can happen anywhere, but my presence here doesn't increase your risk. If anything, it probably decreases it slightly, since I'm trained to spot suspicious behavior and respond to emergencies. Tom could see the relief on their faces. They'd been worried about property values, he realized. Worried that having an FBI agent in the neighborhood might scare off potential buyers or cause problems. Rachel's calm, practical explanation had addressed those concerns without making them feel foolish for asking. There's one more thing, Richard said. He looked even more uncomfortable now. Patricia wants to apologize to you in person. She asked if she could come by your house. Rachel's expression hardened. No. She's genuinely remorseful. I don't care. She violated my privacy for weeks. She created a security risk for my family. An apology doesn't fix that, and honestly, I don't want her anywhere near my house. That's part of the problem. She doesn't understand boundaries. Richard nodded slowly. I understand. I'll let her know. However, Rachel added, her voice softening slightly, if she wants to write a letter or something, I'll read it. From a distance. With no expectation that I'll respond or accept. But I'm not comfortable with a face-to-face meeting. That's fair. Very fair. They talked for a few more minutes about practical matters. The board assured them that the incident would be noted in the official records as a misunderstanding caused by insufficient verification. They promised that HOA procedures would be reformed to prevent similar situations. They even offered to reduce their annual dues as a gesture of goodwill, which Rachel immediately declined. We don't want special treatment, she said firmly. We just want to be regular residents. Walking home afterward, Tom felt like they'd turned a corner. The tension that had been building for weeks had finally broken. The neighborhood knew about Rachel now, which wasn't ideal, but at least the secret was out in a controlled way rather than through gossip and rumor. Do you think Patricia will actually write that letter? Tom asked. Probably. She strikes me as someone who can't stand the thought of people being angry with her. Rachel paused at the edge of their driveway, looking up at their house. You know what's weird? I almost missed the anonymity. When we moved here, I was just Rachel Chen, regular person. Now I'm Rachel Chen, FBI agent. That's going to change how people see me. Is that necessarily bad? It's different. Some people will treat me like I'm fascinating. Some will be nervous around me. Some will ask constant questions about my job that I can't answer. Nobody will just see me as a regular neighbor anymore. Tom put his arm around her shoulders. I still see you as my wife who can't cook to save her life and who steals all the blankets at night. She laughed. That's true. Maybe everyone else will get used to it too. Over the next few days, Tom started to see what Rachel meant about things being different. Neighbors who had previously just waved now wanted to stop and chat. Not hostile conversations, but curious ones. Careful ones. Like they were trying to figure out if Rachel was a normal person or some kind of superhero Mrs. Henderson from next door brought over cookies and spent 10 minutes talking about how safe she felt knowing there was a federal agent nearby. The teenage kid who mowed lawns asked Tom if Rachel carried a gun all the time. Even the mailman seemed more formal when delivering packages. Some reactions were worse than others. The couple 3 houses down, the Patels, suddenly became very standoffish. Tom saw Mrs. Patel hurry her kids inside when Rachel came home from work one evening. He mentioned it to Rachel, who just shrugged. Some people are uncomfortable around law enforcement. Might be cultural. Might be personal history. Might be that they're paranoid about privacy. It's fine. They'll either get used to it or they won't. The letter from Patricia arrived 4 days after the board meeting. It was in their mailbox when Tom got home from work, in a plain envelope with the Chen family written on. 3 months after Patricia left Pinewood Gardens, Tom stood in the checkout line at the grocery store and overheard 2 women talking about his wife. He recognized one of them, Mrs. Henderson from next door. The other was a stranger, probably someone from a different part of the neighborhood. She's really nice once you get to know her, Mrs. Henderson was saying. Quiet, keeps to herself mostly, but she helped us when our house got broken into last month. Knew exactly what to do, what information the police would need, had everything documented perfectly. I'd be nervous living next to an FBI agent, the other woman said. Wouldn't you feel like you're being watched all the time? Mrs. Henderson laughed. That's exactly what I thought at first. But honestly, it's the opposite. She doesn't care what anyone does as long as they're not breaking the law. And even then, she always says she's off duty when she's home. She's not interested in neighborhood drama. Tom smiled to himself and didn't announce his presence. It was strange hearing people discuss Rachel like she was some kind of celebrity. But Mrs. Henderson was right. Life had settled into a comfortable routine. Rachel went to work, came home, and mostly kept to herself. The neighbors had gotten used to her presence and the initial nervousness had faded. The changes in the neighborhood were subtle but real. The new HOA board was more relaxed, less focused on enforcing every tiny rule. They'd revised the community guidelines to focus on actual issues rather than nitpicking details. Grass could be 3 inches now instead of 2.5. Holiday decorations could stay up for a full week after the holiday. Small changes, but they made the neighborhood feel more like a community and less like a military installation. Rachel's presence had another unexpected effect. Crime in Pinewood Gardens dropped. Tom wasn't sure if that was coincidence or if word had somehow spread that an FBI agent lived in the neighborhood. Either way, there hadn't been a single break-in since Rachel's credentials had been revealed at that meeting. The teenager who used to tag fences with graffiti had mysteriously stopped. Even the packages left on doorsteps seemed safer. I think criminals can smell cops, Rachel joked when Tom mentioned it, like how animals can sense fear. That's not a real thing. Isn't it, though? She grinned. Or maybe people are just a little more careful when they know someone's watching. Not that I'm watching, but they don't know that. The real test came in early November when a new family moved into Patricia's old house. The Johnsons had 2 young kids and a very energetic golden retriever that barked at everything. Within a week, someone had complained to the HOA about the noise. Tom found out about it when Richard called him, sounding nervous. I know this is awkward, Richard said, but the board wanted to know if you and Rachel would be willing to talk to the new neighbors. About the dog. We don't want to come on too strong after everything that happened with Patricia, but the barking is becoming an issue. Why are you calling us? Because people listen to Rachel. She has a way of making things clear without being aggressive. And frankly, we're all still a little gun-shy about telling anyone what to do after the last situation. Tom mentioned it to Rachel that evening. She rolled her eyes but agreed. I'll stop by tomorrow. But this is not becoming a regular thing. I'm not the neighborhood enforcer. The next day, Rachel walked down to the Johnson house and knocked on the door. Tom went with her, curious to see how she'd handle it. A harried-looking woman in her 30s answered, holding a toddler on her hip. Hi, I'm Rachel Chen from down the street. This is my husband Tom. Welcome to the neighborhood. Oh, hi. I'm Jennifer Johnson. Sorry, it's been chaos getting settled in. Come in, please. Ignore the boxes. The golden retriever immediately bounded over, tail wagging furiously. Rachel knelt down and scratched behind its ears. Beautiful dog. What's his name? That's Cooper. He's a handful, but the kids love him. They chatted for a few minutes about the neighborhood, where the best grocery store was, which school the kids would attend. Rachel was relaxed and friendly, nothing in her demeanor suggesting she was about to address a complaint. Then casually she brought it up, so Cooper's pretty vocal, huh? I can hear him from our house when he's in the backyard. Jennifer's face fell. Oh no, is he bothering you? I'm so sorry. He barks at everything, squirrels, birds, leaves. We're working on training, but it's slow going. He's not bothering me, Rachel said. I'm usually not home during the day anyway. But some of the neighbors have mentioned it to the HOA, and I wanted to give you a heads up before it becomes an official thing. An official thing? The previous owner of this house had some issues with the HOA. They can be a bit strict about rules. I wanted to make sure you knew about the concern before they send you a formal letter. Those letters can feel pretty aggressive even when they're meant to be helpful. Jennifer looked genuinely distressed. I don't want to cause problems. What should I do? Rachel pulled out her phone. Can I show you something? There are these ultrasonic devices you can put in your yard. When the dog barks, it emits a sound only dogs can hear. It's not harmful, just annoying enough that it discourages barking. My friend uses one and swears by it. She showed Jennifer the product, explained how it worked, and even recommended a local pet store that carried them. By the time they left, Jennifer was grateful rather than defensive, and Cooper's barking problem had been addressed without any formal complaints or violation notices. See? Rachel said as they walked home. That's how you handle neighborhood issues. You talk to people like they're actual people. You help them solve problems instead of just pointing out that problems exist. You're really good at this. It's basically what I do at work, just with lower stakes. Escalation, problem solving, finding common ground. Turns out those skills work pretty well with HOA disputes too. Word spread about how Rachel had handled the situation. More neighbors started coming to her with issues instead of going straight to the board. The teenager whose music was too loud. The couple whose trash cans were always out too long. The guy whose car leaked oil on the street. Rachel dealt with all of them with the same calm, practical approach. She never threatened or judged. She just helped people figure out solutions. You've basically become the neighborhood mediator, Tom observed one evening. That's got to be ironic given how much you hate attention. Rachel shrugged. It's better than having the HOA turn into what it was under Patricia. And honestly, most of these problems are easy to solve if people just communicate. That's what Patricia never understood. She saw violations instead of people. The holiday season brought an unexpected development. The neighborhood decided to have a community party for the first time in years. It was supposed to be casual, just a potluck in the park with some lights and music. But as the planning progressed, people kept suggesting that Rachel should help organize it. Why me? She asked when Richard called to request her involvement. Because people trust you. Because you bring people together instead of dividing them. And because, honestly, this neighborhood hasn't felt like a real community in years. Not until you made us all remember that we're supposed to be neighbors, not just people who happen to live near each other. Rachel tried to decline, but Tom could see she was secretly pleased. For someone who valued privacy so much, she'd managed to build something meaningful here, not through her job title or her federal badge, but through the way she treated people, with respect, with practical help, with the understanding that everyone was just trying to live their life without too much hassle. The party was a success. Nearly every family in Pinewood Gardens showed up. Kids ran around the park while adults ate and talked and actually got to know each other. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous cookies. The Johnsons brought Cooper, who was significantly less barky thanks to the ultrasonic device. Even the Patels, who had been standoffish for months, showed up with homemade samosas that everyone raved about. Tom stood with Rachel near the food tables, watching the scene. You did this, you know. I organized a potluck. That's not exactly saving the world. No, I mean all of this. Making this neighborhood feel like an actual community. That's bigger than one party. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Patricia did some of it too in her own way. She showed everyone what happens when you let rules become more important than people. Sometimes you need a negative example to appreciate the positive. That's surprisingly generous of you. I've had time to think about it. She wasn't evil. She was just scared. Scared of change. Scared of losing control. Scared that if she wasn't constantly vigilant, something bad would happen. I deal with actually dangerous people in my job. Patricia was just someone who needed to feel useful and went about it the wrong way. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Tom saw a familiar silver sedan drive slowly past the park. Patricia. She must have come back to visit or pick up mail or something. For a moment, her car slowed even further as she looked at the party. Tom couldn't see her expression from this distance, but he imagined she felt a mixture of emotions. Regret for what she'd lost. Relief that the neighborhood was thriving without her. Maybe even a little happiness that things had worked out. Then the car sped up and disappeared around the corner. Did you see that? Tom asked. Yeah. Rachel watched the empty street. Good for her. Coming. The moving truck pulled away from the curb, just as the sun was setting over Pinewood Gardens. Tom stood on the front lawn of their new house, hands on his hips, looking at the boxes stacked inside through the open door. His wife Rachel was already inside, directing the placement of furniture with the kind of precision that made her good at her job. Whatever that job was exactly, Tom still wasn't entirely sure. She didn't talk about it much. Pinewood Gardens was everything they'd hoped for when they started house hunting 6 months ago. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, a small park at the end of the block, where kids played every evening. The kind of place where people waved at each other and knew their neighbors' names. At least that's what the real estate agent had promised them. What the agent hadn't mentioned was Patricia Henley. Patricia lived 3 houses down in a pale yellow colonial that looked like it had been cleaned with a toothbrush. Every shingle was perfect. Every flower in her garden stood at attention like soldiers. Her mailbox gleamed in the sunlight. She'd been on the HOA board for 7 years, and if you asked anyone in the neighborhood, they'd tell you she ran it like a military operation. Tom first met Patricia on their second day in the house. He was dragging empty boxes to the curb when a silver sedan pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, and a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and oversized sunglasses looked him up and down. "You're the new family in the Morrison house," she said. "It wasn't a question." "That's us," Tom replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Tom Chen, nice to meet you." "Patricia Henley, HOA board member." She handed him a thick folder through the window. "These are the community guidelines. Trash goes out Wednesday evenings, not before 6 p.m. Lawn maintenance every Saturday. No vehicles parked on the street overnight. No exterior modifications without board approval. Welcome to the neighborhood." Before Tom could respond, she rolled up her window and drove away. That night, Tom and Rachel sat on their living room floor eating pizza from paper plates, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. Tom flipped through the HOA guidelines, his eyes getting wider with each page. "Listen to this," he said. "Grass height cannot exceed 2.5 inches. Garden gnomes are prohibited. Holiday decorations must be removed within 48 hours of the holiday's conclusion. Christmas lights must be white or clear only, no colored lights." Rachel looked up from her phone where she was checking something work-related. "Sounds like every HOA. There's a section on approved paint colors. 17 pages long." "We're not repainting," Rachel said, taking another bite of pizza. "The house is fine as it is." Tom wanted to agree, but something about that folder made him nervous. He'd heard HOA horror stories before. Fines for leaving trash cans out too long, lawsuits over fence heights, neighbors reporting neighbors for the smallest infractions. He'd thought those were exaggerations. Now he wasn't so sure. Rachel started her new position the following Monday. Tom watched her get ready that morning, noting the clothes she laid out on the bed. Dark pants, a fitted jacket, boots that looked more practical than fashionable. She clipped something to her belt, tucked something else into an inner jacket pocket. She moved with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from doing the same routine 1,000 times. "Big day?" he asked. "Just normal stuff," she replied, pulling her hair back into a tight ponytail. "I'll probably be late tonight." "Don't wait up. What time is late?" "Could be midnight. Could be 2 a.m. Depends on how things go." This was normal for them. Rachel's job had always been like this. Irregular hours, vague descriptions, and unwillingness to discuss details. When they'd first started dating 8 years ago, it had bothered Tom. Now he was used to it. She worked in law enforcement, he knew that much. Something federal. Something that required her to carry a weapon and occasionally disappear for days at a time. Beyond that, she kept the details to herself, and Tom had learned not to push. What he hadn't considered was how this would look to the neighbors. Patricia noticed Rachel's schedule within the first week. Tom knew because on Saturday morning, while he was mowing the lawn at exactly 8 a.m. as specified in the guidelines, Patricia appeared at the edge of his property with a clipboard. "Your wife keeps unusual hours," she said, pretending to make notes about something on her clipboard. "She works in the city," Tom replied, trying to keep his voice friendly. "Government job. You know how it is." "I noticed she was leaving at 5:30 yesterday morning, and she came home after 11 p.m. on Thursday." Tom felt his jaw tighten. "Like I said, government job. Sometimes the hours are unpredictable." "And what exactly does she do?" "Law enforcement." Patricia's eyebrows rose above her sunglasses. "Really? What department?" "I have a cousin in the police department downtown. Maybe they know each other." "Different agency," Tom said, turning back to his lawnmower. "If you'll excuse me, I need to finish this before it gets too hot." He could feel Patricia watching him as he pushed the mower across the yard, but she eventually walked away. Tom thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia seemed to be everywhere. Tom would see her car parked on their street at odd hours. She'd be checking her mailbox when Rachel left for work in the morning. She'd be walking her tiny white dog past their house when Rachel came home at night. Always watching. Always noting. Rachel noticed too. "That woman from down the street," she said one evening, looking out the front window. "The blonde one. Is she always around like this?" "Patricia? She's on the HOA board. I think she takes her job very seriously. She watches me leave every morning." Maybe she's just curious about the new neighbors, Rachel's expression suggested. She didn't buy that explanation. In her line of work, you learn to spot surveillance. You learn to recognize when someone was paying too much attention, and Patricia Henley was definitely paying attention. The situation escalated on a Tuesday morning. Rachel was leaving for work earlier than usual, around 4:30 a.m. She was wearing what Tom privately thought of as her tactical gear, the kind of outfit that suggested she'd be doing more than sitting at a desk that day. Dark clothing, multiple pockets, boots designed for running if necessary. She looked official and serious, which made sense given what her job actually involved. Patricia was apparently an early riser too. Tom didn't witness this encounter himself. He was still asleep, but Rachel told him about it that evening, and there was something in her voice that suggested she was more annoyed than usual. "The HOA lady stopped me in the driveway this morning," Rachel said. "Asked me directly what I was wearing and why I was dressed like that." "What did you tell her?" "That it was work attire. She asked what kind of work requires that kind of outfit. I told her it was none of her business." Tom winced. Patricia didn't strike him as the kind of person who responded well to being told something was none of her business. "She took photos," Rachel added quietly. "Photos? Of what?" "Of me. Of my clothes. She stood on the sidewalk and took pictures with her phone while I was getting into my car. That crossed a line and they both knew it. Taking photos of someone without permission, documenting their daily routine, questioning their clothing choices. It was harassment. But in an HOA, the lines between community concern and overreach often got blurry. Tom wanted to march down to Patricia's house and tell her to back off. Rachel stopped him. "Let it go," she said. "I've dealt with worse than nosy neighbors." But Patricia wasn't done. Not even close. She'd decided that something suspicious was happening in her perfect neighborhood, and she was going to get to the bottom of it. What she didn't know was that the person she'd decided to investigate wasn't just some random neighbor with an unusual job. Rachel was someone you really didn't want to mess with, and Patricia was about to find that out the hard way.